Are your messages failing and you just don't really know why? Well, in today's video, we're going to be digging into the most common reasons why your SMS messages may fail to deliver to your recipients. Hi, my name is Will Craig. I am a co-founder of a company called Signal House. Signal House specializes in providing connectivity for CRM systems for application to person messaging, but we can power any messaging from any kind of software solution that a business uses to communicate with their prospects. So let's go ahead and dig right in. So before we get too far ahead, I wanted to define 10DLC and A2P and how this works in the overall messaging ecosystem and what you can expect when you're sending a message as a business to your customer and what parties are involved and where those issues could potentially be. So to start, 10DLC just stands for 10-digit long code. These are the phone numbers that we're all familiar with, where the first 3 digits correspond to a local area code. Now, normally these are phone numbers that you would see on your cell phone. So how does a business have the opportunity to use these to communicate with you? And it's a great question. They go through a process called 10DLC A2P, which is application to person registration. And so with this process, by registering their brand, which is their business information, and their campaign, which is the messaging use case, they go through the approval process, and then they are able to use a 10-digit phone number to correspond with you on behalf of their business. And so let's talk a little bit about what the different players are within this process of when you click send to when a message actually reaches the handset. So in general, there's going to be 3 basic layers. There is your messaging provider, there is a direct connect aggregator or a DCA, and then there is the carrier. So your messaging provider is going to be the main partner that you work with to get your messages delivered. Now, your messaging provider is going to be working with one of 4 in the United States, direct connect aggregators or DCA. The direct connect part of that just means that they have a direct connection to the carriers within the United States. So T-Mobile, Verizon, AT&T, and all of the other smaller sort of carrier networks that are involved within the messaging ecosystem. So the Direct Connect aggregator makes it possible for your messages to go from your messaging provider to the carriers. They are essentially that link, that third party that is involved within that process. And so there can be more than that. However, I talked about the 3. There's the messaging provider, the DCA, and the carrier, but there can be actually more layers involved in this process. And it's especially true when you start talking about resellers. So people who resell connectivity from a messaging provider, as well as multiple direct connect aggregators or multiple review processes before your message actually gets out, multiple parties that themselves correspond with a different carrier. So a little bit confusing. Let me break it down. I promise it will not be that confusing. So let's say that you are a customer of a CRM. You want to communicate with your prospects, so you type a message out and you click send. Now, this is one possible pathway, is it goes directly from your CRM to the DCA, to the carrier, to the handset. But most likely, there's going to be additional jumps within that process. So here is one such solution where there's actually 6 steps involved. So your messaging reseller, so the CRM, you click send. It goes from that company to a messaging provider. So that's one hop. From the messaging provider to a tier 2 aggregator, which is what Signal House is. So this is one step below a direct connect aggregator. So it goes to the tier 2 provider, then it goes to one DCA. So this is a direct connect aggregator that's working with a large number of the carriers, but maybe for a specific carrier needs to go through yet another partner. And then you have the second DCA, and then you have the carrier and the handset. So there's a lot of jumps. And with each jump, you are making yourself susceptible to really 3 different kinds of rejections or 3 different kinds of reasons why your message would not reach the handset of your customers. It's going to be technical issues, content filtering, and handset issues. So the first 2 are going to be the most common just because they are the vast majority are going to be either a technical issue with any of those kind of 6 hops we talked about, where the systems are just not quite communicating perfectly together, or content filtering. So whatever the message was identified as being too close to scam or spam messages. So let's dive into both of those a little bit more in depth. So as it relates to technical issues, first, the most common is going to be a connection issue. So again, if you have 6 different hops that you have to go to, that's 6 different API connections with 6 different parties. Each level that you go up, there's going to be an increase in volume. So you're going to have a set number of volume from your CRM. Their messaging provider is going to have multiple CRMs connected to them. That tier 2 is going to have multiple messaging providers, and so on and so forth, until you get to the DCAs, where again, there's only 4 in the US, where all business messaging flows through. So if there's any kind of technical glitch, or that connection is not just rock solid perfect, you could have some kind of technical error here. Normally, you'll see that in the error code as a technical issue, reach out to support, or something similar. That's what we do when there's a technical issue upstream of us, is we just say that there was a technical issue, reach out to support, we'll help you identify what specifically that was, or we'll let you know from our upstream providers what the issue was so that it doesn't happen to you again. And again, if you minimize the number of hops that are upstream from your company, so us at Signal House, we have at most 1 hop between us and the carriers, that helps you prevent these technical issues from happening. So we rarely see those on our end. Now let's talk about issues with T-Mobile in particular. So I single out T-Mobile, and I'm going to do a whole video on this, but what you need to know is that T-Mobile is unique among the top 3 carriers. They have their own proprietary system that they flow everything through. And because of that, while AT&T and Verizon are on a very consistent system, there's not generally issues there. But again, T-Mobile on their own proprietary system, there can be issues there for T-Mobile specifically. So if your messages are failing to T-Mobile, it's most likely a technical issue with your upstream provider's pathway to T-Mobile. And again, that's just something that your upstream provider will be able to guide you through and let you know the reason why. The other is just communication between databases and different infrastructure. So there is, in the same way that you have 2 websites that communicate together via an IP address, where they're able to identify the different websites, we have something very similar in the messaging ecosystem. It's called an NNID, or a net number ID. That net number ID is unique to each of the messaging providers in the ecosystem, as well as carriers and other different parties in that regard. So us at Signal House, we have 2 NNIDs that are associated with our company that we use depending on if someone purchases a number from us or if they port a number into our service. So we have 2 of them for those purposes. Now, there can be issues where your NNID, for whatever reason, just doesn't communicate to the NNID of the upstream provider. That is obviously a database-related issue that is upstream of your messaging provider, just another technical issue that can happen. So those are the 3 most common technical issues that you'll run into. Again, all of these really relies on your messaging provider to identify a pathway forward for you, let you know specifically what's going on, what their plan of remediation is, and how soon you can expect to see a fix. Now, what about content filtering? So content filtering is really going to be specific to the pathway that you're using to the carriers. And that's really how you should be thinking about your messaging as a company. It's not necessarily who you're working with as a direct messaging provider. It is what your pathway to the carriers looks like. And so I would urge you, when you're having these conversations with a messaging provider, if you're looking to switch or if you're looking to dip your toes into it for the first time, ask them, what does my pathway to the carriers look like? What do your carrier connections look like? Who are your upstream providers? If they are not transparent about that, I would move on. You need transparency in whatever partner you work with. We have connections to 3 DCAs. We have a direct connect to Cineverse, a direct connect to Infobip, and then we have a carrier partner that we go through for Cinch. And so those are the 3 that we're connected with. Vibes is the only DCA that we are not connected with. Again, transparency. I think it's the best thing that we can do. So at any of these stages, of any of these pathways to the carriers, you're going to have different organizations that have different policies around the type of traffic that they allow on their networks. Hence, content filtering. So if you have content filtering in place, Signal House, we do not do content filtering. We just make sure that we only allow our customers who are good actors in the space. So we don't do any kind of content filtering, but other companies do. Twilio, for example, is known for having really strict content filtering. And so that content filtering is basically either keyword filtering or algorithmic filtering. Ask your messaging provider, do you do keyword filtering or do you do algorithmic filtering for content filtering, or do you do no content filtering at all? No is going to be the best. Algorithmic is going to be better. Keyword, I would move on, because I've had a situation where we previously at another company were sending our traffic through a particular pathway to the carriers that did involve content filtering. And we had a lawn care company that we were working with that had weed in the name, and all of the messages were blocked because of the word weed. And again, weeds are in lawns, and it was just a lawn care company. So it's kind of ridiculous. But what they're doing is they're just taking known scam messages, and they're comparing those messages to the messages you're sending out. If they're too similar, they'll filter your messages out because it's suspected spam. And so it comes down to what the strength of their algorithmic filtering is, if it is algorithmic filtering, of how frequently you're going to get your messages failing. But what's important for you to know is that there is a possibility that you could have worse deliverability with the exact same messages and the exact same messaging campaign use case on one provider and another because of the content filtering that they have in place, or the upstream content filtering. So there's content filtering from your messaging provider, from the DCA, and from the carrier. Now, again, there's only 4 DCAs in the US. That's going to be pretty consistent for everyone. It's the messaging provider that you really need to look at and determine, are they very heavy on content filtering? Are they light on it? Or do they not do any at all? And so those are all questions that you need to ask a messaging provider if you are looking for one. And then the last thing is going to be handset rejection, or just handset issues in general. And so an important thing to know is that messages will only queue or pinned delivery for a specific amount of time, for only so long. And so if, for example, someone's phone is off for 24 hours, that message is going to fail. Or if they are out of service, so let's say they're on a plane or whatever the case may be, it can fail for that reason as well. And then there's a third reason that it can fail, particularly in this regard, and that is because that user reported your message as junk. So on iPhone, we have the ability to report a message as junk. That information does not go to the messaging provider. Signal House, if you're sending traffic on our network, we do not get notifications that someone reported your messaging as junk. This is a very backwards thing in the messaging ecosystem. That data goes to the carrier. If you opt out, that information does go to Signal House and the carrier, but report junk only goes to the carrier. So you could have a message that's just being blocked by a handset because they've reported you junk and they blocked your messaging, but you just don't know that because you don't have that visibility. So that's something that we are trying to change, and a lot of people in the space are trying to change, but right now that is just a limitation. So as an end user, best case scenario is to reply stop and report junk. But if you are having an issue getting that message delivered to a specific handset, it is possible that that is the reason why. And so I hope that this was helpful. Tomorrow, we're going to be digging a little bit more into T-Mobile in particular, to review a little bit some of their quirks that they have as a company, and why you can particularly see T-Mobile issues where you don't see other carrier issues. And so be on the lookout for that. And as always, if you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. If it was helpful, share it with someone who you think it could also help. We put out videos 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, all about the messaging ecosystem to help you survive in this crazy climate that we call business messaging in 2025. So with that, we'll see you in the next one. Thanks so much.